Hello, English 408. I hope everybody's doing well. It's me. We're gonna write some poems and talk about some poems. Here's the deal. Today I have Noah's poems. He gave me two from the book and a writing exercise. We're gonna read those poems and then do the writing exercise. Um, Here's what we're going to do in terms of participation for the rest of the semester. The way that you are going to do your participation now is underneath this video. You can either post comments about the poems that Noah picked for us, or you can share with us your own poem that you wrote during the exercise. So those are two ways that you can comment, two ways that you can participate in class, okay? You can make comments about the poems, or you can share it with everyone your poems. Frankly, if you want to do both of them, that's perfectly okay too. Gotta say, I've made a couple of other videos for a couple of my other classes. Starting to get a little tired of myself. Starting to get a little tired of the way I sound, the way I look, and all of that. So, of course, y'all have been tired of me for a long time, no doubt, because you've had to watch and listen to me. It's just new to me. At any rate, I thought real quickly too, I'd show y'all around. So this is my basement. This is where I do all my creative stuff. Um, I got my music stuff. Um, and oh, I got stuff on the walls, and I got a staircase, and yeah. So this is where I do my stuff. I just thought that might be nice to show y'all where I'm sitting at. Okay, everyone. So grab your books. We are going to first look at a poem that Noah picked out for us on page 40. And the poem is Days by Emerson. So on page 40, let's find this. Okay, Days. Um, Emerson, Ralph Waldo Emerson. Oh, good God, people. He's an important person in American literature. This is called Days. Days. This is on page 40. Ready? Daughters of time, the hypocrite days, muffled and dumb like barefoot dervishes, and marching single in an endless file, bring diadems and faggots in their hands. To each they offer gifts after his will, bread, kingdoms, stars, and skies that hold them all. I, in my pleached garden, watched the pomp, forgot my morning wishes, hastily took a few herbs and apples, and the day turned and departed silent. I, too late, under her solemn fillet, saw the scorn. Huh. Oh my God. I, too late, under her solemn fillet, saw the scorn. Okay, so let's see what Noah has to say about this. Noah said he loves this poem because of the ability to transport the reader into a fictional world while keeping the audience in a familiar experience, in this case, time and days. Personifying time and its days gives the poem a very ethereal vibe to it and distinguishes it from other transcendentalist poetry, right? Because Emerson's one of our transcendentalist poets. I enjoyed how the poet took center stage during the second half of the poem, showing his defiance, a big theme in Emerson's essays, against time. It feels like a poem written in the 20th century rather than the middle of the 19th century with its use of abstractions. This idea of humanity worshiping time as it passes us by and us giving, maybe wasting all of our resources to adorn it may, in Emerson's view, be foolish. Yes, so the idea that humanity worships time as it passes us by might be a foolish thing to do. I'm with you, Noah. That makes a whole bunch of sense to me. The poem, for being awfully short, to me, is relatively confusing with all kinds of interesting words like diadems and dervishes and faggots and pomp. And I don't know, people. Interesting words. Likewise, interesting, what we have day and time both being personified, so obviously those are both capitalized. So, daughters of time, the hypocrite days. Oh, so days are the daughters of time. So we've divided up time into daughters, muffled and dumb like barefoot dervishes, and marching single in an endless file, bringing diadems and faggots in their hands. Okay, so right, the critical, the hypocritical days, they're like marching forward. To each they offer gifts from his will, bread, kingdom, stars, and sky that holds them all. To each they offer gifts. The days offer stuff. I in my pleached, oh, that was the other word I was looking for, pleached, I'm not even sure what that means, garden, watched the pomp, forgot my morning wishes, hastily took a few herbs and apples, and the day turned and departed silent. I too. Okay, so the day leaves silently. So, at any rate, interesting poem. Emerson, an interesting guy. Let's keep on going here. Let's go to page 651, and we're going to look at poem called My Old Man by Charles Bukowski. Oh, this just reminded me, I'm sorry, with the last poem and the days, etc., that, when there was a big tsunami in Thailand, maybe a number of years ago. Now, in 60 Minutes, did a little piece on this group of people that live basically on boats, who saw, because they're on the water, they saw animals swimming. They knew something was going on because they live on the water, and they all got to safety and remained safe. At any rate, the point of this is supposedly they didn't use time. They didn't. This group of people didn't have the concept of time. I don't know what that even means. Okay, Charles Bukowski, My Old Man. Um, I'm going to read this. My old man, 16 years old during the Depression, I'd come home drunk, and all my clothing, shorts, shirts, stockings, suitcase, and pages of short stories would be thrown out on the front lawn about the street. My mother would be waiting behind a tree. Henry, Henry, don't go in. He'll kill you. He'll read your stories. I can whip his ass. Henry, please take this and find yourself a room. But it worried him that I might not finish high school, so I'd be back again. One evening he walked in with pages of one of my short stories, which I had never submitted to him. And he said, "This is a great short story." I said, "Okay." And he handed it to me, and I read it. It was a story about a rich man who had a fight with his wife and had gone out into the night for a cup of coffee and had observed the waitress and the spoons and the forks and the salt and the pepper shakers and the neon light in the window, and then he had gone back to his stable to see and touch his favorite horse, who then kicked him in the head and killed him. Somehow the story held meaning for him, though when I had written it, I had no idea what I was writing about. So I told him, "Okay, old man, you can have it." And he took it and walked out and closed the door. I guess that's as close as we ever got. Okay, so let's see what Noah has to say about this. Bukowski's style is very direct and void of any structure, absolutely. Wordplay or pleasurable sounding lines. Yes, he is not being overly poetic or doing those types of things, poetic things as we might imagine them. That doesn't mean his poetry is simple stream of consciousness thrown onto a page. Every word still feels calculated and intentional. The short lines find narrative style poem packs a lot into a short amount of, packs a lot of information in a short space. The poet shows and doesn't waste time telling or analyzing, but lets his audience do it for him. He gives a setting, characters, a sense of time progression, and loading it with emotional baggage. I think this gives us as poets another tool to talk about our experiences, giving our audiences a movie feel rather than a series of metaphors to try to explain our past. Bukowski is very blunt and direct, something we may or may not try to mimic in our own poetry, but certainly is a different way of worth writing, worth playing with. Okay, so I'm with you, Noah, absolutely. One of the things about Bukowski is that he's obviously talking in a very straightforward manner. Those of you who are not familiar with Bukowski, he is, I want to say, one of the better known poets of the last X number of years. Though there's a lot of people who don't like Charles Bukowski for many good reasons. He was a misogynist and probably very likely anti-Semitic and bigoted, I think, in a number of ways and problematic as a person. But at any rate, he wrote some poems that people like a whole bunch, and they all are like this, meaning they are all roughly narrative, straightforward accounts. Again, nothing as Noah points out, not wordplay, not the things that we might think of in traditional poetry. And so obviously here he tells this story about coming home drunk and how his dad would throw him out of the house. And then his dad reads this short story of his about a guy who gets kicked in the head. And he mentions, hey, somehow the story had meaning for him. And so he gives it to his dad and he walked out, and I guess that's as close as we ever got. And so what are we supposed to make of this? I guess a number of things, maybe. One, there is something to be said for writing in an exceedingly straightforward manner. Two, I guess here, this is something that I think most of us can relate to. Not necessarily that we have a bothersome relationship with our dad, but most of us have some sort of problematic relationship with our parent on some level or another. And so we've got that going on. And then, of course, one of the bigger ideas, I think, here, too, is this is obviously, in a lot of ways, a horrible memory, being kicked out of the house and having his dad be a complete asshole, and having this turbulent home life. But he's able to write a poem about it, and for whatever reason, one of the great things about art is that we can take horrible things in our lives and turn them into something at least worth enjoying for a moment, maybe even something beautiful. Art has a way of transforming things from the tragic into something else. So, at any rate, a lot of the other poems in here that they have of Bukowski, again, are all very similar. If you like that sort of style of thing, check that out. And I guess the other thing here is I just think that the big idea of that his father identifies with a story in which a guy gets in a fight and ultimately gets kicked in the head by a horse. What is he identifying with there? He's identifying with, let's say, the guy who gets kicked in the head. Is he identifying with the horse? What is he identifying with? The idea that you get killed by something you love, by something that you just stopped by to touch because you love, and while you go love it, it kills you. That's an interesting idea. And maybe something we're all familiar with again on some level or another. I think we have all loved before only to be hurt very badly by it. And maybe to some degree or another killed by it. I don't know. So here's what we're going to do now, people. We're going to write a poem. You can use this poem as your comment in the comment section below, or you can make comments on the poems. Here's the exercise that Noah has for us. Try writing in a blunt narrative style poem that Bukowski utilizes. Try telling a narrative that has at least two different settings with, like my old man does. Be blunt, choosing your words conservatively rather than filling your descriptions with poetic vocabulary. And so we're going to write something relatively straightforward, a narrative, maybe with two different settings taking place. I do want to point out, it strikes me as the book of Chinese poetry that we've been reading, like Bukowski, it talks in a relatively straightforward manner, though it certainly uses more nature imagery and more, I want to say, sort of symbolism or I don't know. But there's a similarity there, and I mean, maybe worth thinking about that maybe back in ancient China, people had already thought this idea of writing in this sort of blunt way, though, again, there's quite a few differences. But at any rate, I'm going to write a poem. I'm going to give us like 5 minutes. Everybody ready? We're going to do this just like in class. And then we'll be done. So here we go, a blunt narrative style poem. Try telling a narrative that has at least two different settings, like my old man does. Okay, here we go. On your mark, get set, go. All right, people. I wrote a couple of poems there. I'm going to share my poems with you, and then y'all can, in the comment box, hopefully share some of your poems. Share some comments about the poems that Noah picked for us today. Ready? Here's the poems that I wrote. The first one is I remember he had a mustache and would hold his hands funny on his hips, talking to the class about war and smoking and the history of the steel industry. But then later at a friend's house, there was pizza and he was there, and now the teacher looked like a pest beneath the house. So that was about a teacher I had who then later I saw at a friend's house, and it was a very strange situation to me when I was in whatever. a freshman in high school. It seemed very odd. And then the other one I wrote was, I would tell you about what happened, but I forget so much about the past that every story I tell ends the same, with pancakes. And so I don't know how narrative or how much like Bukowski that is. But at any rate, y'all share your poems and comments, and I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you, Noah. All right, bye bye.